Okay, I'm going to give you a quick run through of some of the new features in MK 4.6. First, as you can see, there's a login screen, and the new feature here is a password. There's a video covering that, so we'll skip the details, but we're using it. Meanwhile, I'm going to show you this. One thing that I've always been annoyed with is having to double-click somebody, because sometimes the double-click doesn't take. So there's a feature where you can just click them once and hit enter. Not a big deal, but it sure makes my life easier. So here's that. Now, as you can see, there's a button here for Portal. This will actually probably won't work in Dev, but it's also shown in another video where you can click this and it'll bring up their web portal. We log in with our MK username and password, and it'll actually take you to their web portal, which is really useful. As requested, we have 2 of these photo drop-down boxes now, one for their current lease and one for their past lease. These you have to set yourself. They aren't smartly tied to the lease, but that's okay. While we're on this side of the page, there's also this. We've had a workaround for some time where if there's no upload scheduled, you could actually hit the edit button and just add some text to it, and this will force an upload. Now you can just hit the push button, and you'll see the word MK show up here, and this will force it to go into the next upload. Big show over here is on the left. It's the credit score history. Now, this person doesn't actually have a credit score because he's test data, but the actual credit scores and the registration and first upload dates are going to be over here. This is going to be really useful when we're on the phone with people, obviously. Little change to this grid. First off, it's been reshaped. Second, there's a button down here called Create Letter. I'm going to do that right now. And just like before, just like a VOR, it's going to chug for a minute and say this. Now we go over here, and all this really is a simple letter of a tenant release, and this is saying you can have my account. So this is going to be useful for us. I'll also do a VOR. There's some slight changes to this as well. As you can see, there's a little bit more room down here. We've got more space for email and phone. Also, if there's a move out, or if this lease is ended, which this particular one I'm showing you hasn't, but there will be a move out date here. There's some slight changes to the text, so that's going to be useful for us as well. Now, let's say we're going to go to the View Manager tab. Let's say we're editing this guy. We're going to force you. If I put here and click Save, it's going to force you to pick a contact method. So we'll do IVR phone. Also, this list is different, and more importantly, this list is dynamic now. If we need to add or remove one of these methods, all I have to do is go in and change the database. So that's going to work out really nicely. Clean this up a little bit. There's less stuff here that we never use, so that's useful. There's also a field here for the website for the landlord, so that could come in handy at some point. So I'm going to save this guy. Another new feature we have is that if a tenant doesn't have a social security number, we won't let you, well, we'll let you save it, but we're going to warn you that there's no social in there. So not only is this required, it'll also show up here in red. We can allow you to save it in case there's something you need to do and don't have the social handy, but it will still warn you about that. So here's another slick feature we have. This is Zishan Ahmad, and he's got a roommate, Bill Smith, and they both live at the same place. And one thing I'm going to do is, let's say Bill Smith calls in and says, I don't live in apartment 444, I live in apartment 4. You hit OK. And Zishan was in 444, but if we hit refresh, you'll notice that's been actually updated on his lease as well. That's going to come in really handy. So the idea here is that a roommate's lease information is going to get changed. Similarly, we're showing their lease payments, and let's say I want to set this to 30 days late for everybody. Hit that. So this guy's now 30 days late. Refresh. This guy's also 30 days late. So that's really useful. One catch of this is if you only do a few months at a time, we can't do that on the other lease, mostly because it's really hard to program. But if you want to do them all at the same time, it'll work. So it'll complain, update saves. We couldn't match this update on the roommate spouse because we don't know which ones are involved. Also, if there are cases where two tenants have the same lease at the same, have multiple leases at the same address, for instance, or at least the same landlord. For instance, John Testingman and his wife, Barbara Testingman, both have multiple leases, or he has multiple leases with the same property manager. And if that happens, we can't tell which lease over here to do, so it's going to punt on updating the second lease. So that's not, that's something to keep in mind, but it's not going to happen all that often. Another feature that we've gotten a bunch of requests for is being able to send a welcome letter again. This is the letter that they get as soon as they sign up, and a lot of times that winds up in their spam folder, or they lose it, or what have you. So there's a button here over on the Stored Documents tab called Send Welcome Email. And it'll verify, it'll pre-populate with their standard, or with the email address we have on file, but let's say you want to send it to somewhere else. Click OK, and it'll just send it, and that's fine. It's not a whole lot to it. It's the exact same Mandrill email that they send when then they sign up. So here's another cool thing. This person here has signed up for $145 and $55, and they've got a messy payment history, mostly because they're test data and I mess with it. But I'm going to take you over here to the Stripe information tab. One thing that's kind of cool, this is how much money we received from them altogether. This is something that's going to be kind of useful for us down the road. We can see how much they've paid us overall. Their registration payments are now going to be grouped by which installment it was and whether or not it's been paid. Now we can expand this and see they tried to pay this several different times and it failed, and then they finally paid up successfully. For more traditional installments, you'll see that they're going to be grouped by the installment number, and you can expand it to see the failed attempt, but you can also tell ultimately if it was good or not, and that's going to be really helpful. We'll come over here to an older tenant and see, again, paid registration payment. Here's all their monthly update fees, again, grouped by month so that you don't have to deal with the big messy noise. And you can see they paid for June 2016, they paid for April 2016. If there's a case where the February or whatever failed once or twice beforehand, you can expand it and see the failed charges, including all the information you need to see. But it's also going to be grouped in a much easier way to read. And again, this person's paid us a lot of money, so that's really useful. So that's it. These are the new features in the new MK, and I hope they're useful. Thanks.